So I'm Josh Christensen with Christensen Hop Farms located in Fort Calhoun, Nebraska. I've been growing hops for 4 years and we are doing a USDA research trial on frass application in hop plants. I've been a farmer my whole life and hops were just something that seemed like a new avenue to try to grow something different. So the plants that we did the trial on are triple pearl and they are 4 years old. And we started the trial last year when they were 3 years old. The frass was applied in the same way to the plants in the first year and in the second year. So with hops, traditionally you would apply fungicide and an insecticide on a regular basis. Fungicide probably every 7 to 10 days and an insecticide as needed, but probably around 4 or 5 applications every year. With the frass, we did it on a weekly basis, so 6 to 8 days in between, no matter what the conditions, whether it was required or not, whether there was an infestation of anything or not. And the benefits of it are then you're organic grown, so you have kind of a different market that you can target with what you're growing. Frass also has some nitrogen and micronutrient benefits to it. So when we applied it the first year, we did 1 cup of frass per section. And then this year we decided to help increase the yield possibly. We doubled the rate that we were using last year. And that was just kind of to see if the nutrients that were in the frass would help boost the plants a little bit more than what we were already giving them. Nebraska being a good place to grow hops is we have good soil for growing most every type of crop. The day length here is probably a little bit under what you want it to be. Hops are very day length sensitive plants and traditionally they're grown farther north than here, but we kind of figured that with the soil that we have and the day length we have is adequate, so it would be a good spot to grow hops. Weeds are the #1 thing to get rid of, but when a hop plant is immature, you can't spray it with any herbicides. So the second year you can, so you can start to combat those. The other biggest issues there are is downy mildew in this area, which is a fungus that grows on them. And you have to apply a fungicide regularly about every 7 to 10 days throughout the growing season to keep it at bay. And then the other major problem is Japanese beetles, which generally come in about the end of June, early July, and then they will run around till about the first week of August or so. But they're bug-wise, they're the worst insect that hops have. So when the Japanese beetles come, they start from the top of the plant and work their way down, and they eat all of the leaves and they just skeletonize the leaves as they work their way down, and they give off a pheromone. So when you get a Japanese beetle, it sends off a scent to other Japanese beetles, and then more and more come. So in a period of a day or two, you can go from almost none to having 8 or 10 per leaf on a plant. Downy mildew, when the plant's young, it will come up as spikes that are infected with it, and they will not grow properly and they won't yield properly as well. Later on in the season, the leaves will get, they can be infected and the underside of them turns black and it weakens the plant. It doesn't make it as healthy as it needs to be, and then it can actually infect the cones and cause them to turn brown and making them worthless. So in the downy mildew, when it comes, it generally it thrives in like dense undergrowth and on dewy, foggy, wet mornings. It will that's when it'll sporulate the most, and then it generally will work its way up from the bottom. So hop farmers will either use a chemical means or other ways to defoliate the bottom of the plant to try and get more airflow circulating around the plants to keep it away. So when we apply the frass helps keep the downy mildew away by heightening or awakening the plant's natural defenses to fight off, a fungus trying to get into the plant. And the same way with the Japanese beetles, what it does is when the frass is applied, it'll wake up the plant's defense mechanisms to try and naturally keep the beetles away. Since we started using the frass, the first year mildew was not really noticeable from the frass to the traditional growing method. The second year, mildew was considerably more noticeable in the frass early in the season. Once the plants were strung and got to the top, the mildew seemed to kind of take care of itself, or the frass took care of the mildew. The Japanese beetles the first year were probably about 30 to 40% more, the density on the plants with the frass compared to the traditional way. And this year it would be pretty close to the same. So I would say that compared to doing it traditionally with the frass, that the mildew isn't as much of an issue, but the Japanese beetles are definitely more of a problem on the frass than on the traditional growing method. At the beginning of the year, when the plants are small, we would just take the frass, put it in a bucket of water, and then go along the rows and dump it out just to kind of do a soil drench on them. Then as the plants got taller, we would use the frass and dust the plants with frass. As long as we were within a day or so of a rain going to come. If there was no rain event, we would make a tee and use an ATV sprayer and spray the plants. And the frass amount were the same. The first year we did 1 cup per section, and this year we're doing 2 to see if we can get a little more nutrients from the frass to the plants. We would scout on a daily or every other day basis for pests such as fungus growth and any insects that were on the plants. And what we would do is just take a count of how many, if it were beetles, we would estimate how many beetles there were on a plant. With mildew, we would just do an individual count on how many spikes or leaves, whatever we saw that was infected. To do the frass application, we chose the spot that we did because it's on the edge of the field. So to keep it controlled as best as we could, we chose the south side so that when we were spraying our other chemicals, we didn't have to worry as much about drifting from it onto the frass plot. And then we chose the farthest east side of the field just because it was the easiest way to isolate. When we apply the frass, we use 2 cups per section. And a section is 1 row, which is 42 feet from pole to pole, is what we call a section. So for this research project, the frass would be 4 sections in total. Farm to brewery, so what we do is once the hop plants are mature and it's time to harvest, we go along and we cut all the bottoms, and then we will pull the top of the plants down, pull on the plant to break the top onto a trailer, and then we take them to a picking machine, which is similar to a combine, but you have to hook every plant on individually. They go through a stripping and then a sorting mechanism. Then you dry them immediately. So when you pick the plants, the hop cones themselves are about 78% moisture, and you dry them down to 9% moisture, preferably the same day. And then they are pressed into bales and stored in a cooler until it's time to pelletize them. So most brewers use what looks like a wood stove pellet is what the hop actually looks like when it goes into the wort when the brewer is making beer.
Unfortunately, the data indicates ineffectiveness of frass to prevent or reduce the impact of Japanese beetle and downy mildew on the 2 plots. In terms of the production level in year 1, there was a 19% average drop in yield for the frass versus non-frass plots, and in year 2, when the frass amount was double, a 13% drop. This poorer yield is attributed to the deeper penetration of the Japanese beetles in the frass plots. Knowing that frass was not effective in combating the Japanese beetles, we wonder if all other factors remain the same, like pesticides and fungicide treatment, would the frass help improve the yield of the hops crop? In terms of oils analysis, the results were negligible, with non-frass generally having slightly higher levels of alpha, beta, and colupuhone compared to the frass-treated plots. When estimating the cost per acre of using frass applied in the manner for this research, for example, sprinkled on dry versus mixed with water for a drench application, cost is nearly double the typical fungicide application costs. We have learned that frass does not appear to be effective at reducing Japanese beetle or downy mildew presence when applied dry, at the doses in year 1 and year 2 on hops crops. Frass applied in this manner is not more cost-effective than traditional treatments. We would like to better understand different impact metrics on different crops, for example, foliage growth, root mass, fruit production in tomatoes, and other typical garden crops. Preliminary research indicates improved growth rate and foliage on tomato and snapdragon plants compared to control and Miracle-Gro test plots. We would like to also understand effectiveness of different application methods and dosages. For example, mixed with soil, combined with water and applied as a root drench tea, or sprinkled on dry. We want to explore opportunities to combine frass with other natural fertilizers for best results in promoting plant growth and soil health.